The man I spent years secretly loving finally looked at me like a woman. And that's when everything about him started to feel wrong. My name is Alice. I was 16 when my family moved into a rental house on a quiet street outside Fort Worth. It was the kind of neighborhood where everybody knew who belonged to which house and who always returned borrowed tools late. My mother liked that kind of street. She said it felt safe. I learned pretty quickly that safe and simple are not the same thing. The house next to ours belonged to a woman named Linda. She was warm in that easy neighbor way, and my mother liked her almost immediately. Linda's son came by all the time, and the first day I saw him, I was standing near our living room window pretending to unpack a box, while really watching him pull into her driveway. His name was Matt. He was older, maybe 25 or 26 back then, and to my 16-year-old mind, he looked like the kind of man girls notice before they fully understand what they're noticing. Tall, broad shoulders, dark blonde hair, relaxed half smile, effortless confidence. He was not loud or flashy. He just had presence, and I felt it immediately. There were two obvious problems. The first was my age, the second was his girlfriend. She came with him most weekends, and every time I heard his truck pull up, my body reacted before my pride could catch up. Then she would step out of the passenger side, and I would have to stand there pretending I was not looking, pretending I was not jealous, pretending I did not care. Her name was Erin, and I hated how quickly I learned it. I knew the crush was ridiculous. That was part of what made it so powerful. I did not tell my best friend. I did not say his name out loud in my room. I kept it to myself because even at 16, I understood how humiliating it would sound. The older neighbor, the man with a girlfriend, the one who probably still saw me as a kid. Still, I noticed everything. The sound of his truck, the way he laughed, the way he rested a hand at the small of Erin's back when they walked up Linda's porch steps. I told myself I was only observing what was right in front of me, but the truth is, I was building him piece by piece in my own mind. That is how fantasies get dangerous. They grow out of ordinary details until the version in your head becomes bigger and kinder than the real person ever had to be. Then a few months after I turned 17, he stopped coming around. At first, I thought he was just busy. Then one afternoon, my mother casually said Linda was about to become a grandmother. My hands went still. Erin was pregnant. Matt and Erin had moved out near her father's land. Everybody was excited. I remember standing there peeling an orange and feeling like something had hit me straight in the chest. I had known he was unavailable. I had seen the girlfriend with my own eyes for months. But a baby is different. A baby is a whole future becoming real in front of you. A baby says this is not a fantasy or a maybe. This is real, and you are nowhere in it. That night, I cried into my pillow over a man who had never been mine. It was humiliating, but it still hurt. So I buried it. I finished high school. I got a steady job at a pharmacy. Over time, the ache dulled. I could go days without thinking about him. Then one morning over coffee, my mother said 4 words that brought the whole thing back to life. Matt moved back in. He and Erin had split. Nobody seemed to know exactly why. Only that he was living with Linda again, and things were tense. I remember standing there with my mug in my hand, feeling that old feeling rise so fast it made me angry with myself. I did not want to care anymore. But some feelings do not die when you think they do. They wait. And the first time he smiled at me like I was no longer the girl next door, I learned just how dangerous a buried hope can be. For a while after that, I tried to act like the news had not reopened anything in me. Matt was back next door, and I told myself that meant nothing. People break up. People move back in with their mothers. None of that had anything to do with me. That was the reasonable version, the one I repeated to myself every morning before work. Then I would hear his truck. It is embarrassing how quickly old feelings can wake up when they have been sleeping inside you for years. I was 19 by then, with a job, routines, bills, and just enough adult life to believe I was no longer the same girl who used to stare through blinds at the neighbor's driveway. But the second I knew he was back, some hidden part of me sat up like it had been waiting the entire time. At first, nothing happened. We crossed paths in small ways. A hello near the curb. A nod when I came home from work and he was outside helping Linda in the yard. Once I saw him carrying a pink plastic toy toward the porch. Probably something for his daughter. And that image stuck with me harder than I wanted it to. It made him seem older, more real, less like the distant crush I had projected everything onto. That should have made him feel farther away. Instead, it made him feel reachable. The first real conversation happened on a Saturday afternoon. I had just gotten back from a short shift at the pharmacy and was walking up our driveway when I saw him mowing Linda's lawn. He shut the mower off when he noticed me, smiled first, and asked how I'd been. Not the polite smile adults give somebody's kid. A real one. Warm, direct, interested. I asked if he was back for good. He said, yeah, look that way. I asked how his daughter was doing, and his face softened when he said she was good. Then he asked where I was working now, whether I still lived at home, how things had been with me. Simple questions, but he was actually looking at me. That alone left me shaky. I said goodbye and started walking toward the front door. Right before I went inside, I turned back almost without thinking. He was watching me, not casually, really watching. When our eyes met, he smiled again, slower this time, and gave me a half wave. I went inside with my pulse all over the place. That was the moment the old crush stopped feeling like a teenage memory and started becoming a live wire again. For the next 2 weeks, I became ridiculous in quiet ways. I lingered checking the mail. I found excuses to take trash out when I heard movement next door. If I came home and saw his truck, my whole mood changed before I even stepped inside. I was embarrassed by myself, and still did it anyway. Hope can make you cooperate with your own humiliation, because you are afraid that if you stop wanting, you might miss the one-time wanting was finally about to matter. The second conversation happened on a weekday evening. He was sitting on Linda's porch steps with a bottle of water when I got home from work. He asked how my shift had gone, then asked whether I was seeing anybody. That question hit me right in the chest. I tried not to show it. I said no, not really. He asked whether I ever went out much. I said not much. He laughed a little and said, "You always were quiet." The way he said it got under my skin immediately. Always were. As if he had noticed me all those years. As if I had existed in his mind too. Then he asked if I wanted to get out sometime. Just drive around maybe, grab something to eat. I tried so hard to answer like a normal person. I think I said, "Yeah, maybe," while inside me every nerve was lit up. We exchanged numbers right there. His first text that night was nothing special, just, "Hey, this is Matt, so now you have my number too." But because it came from him, because it made everything suddenly real, I must have read it 20 times. He asked me out that Sunday. I said yes, then spent too long pretending I was not overthinking what to wear. I wanted to look pretty but not obvious, grown but not like I was trying too hard. Looking back, I was not really choosing clothes. I was trying to control the gap between fantasy and reality. I wore jeans, a fitted cream top, and small hoop earrings. When I got into his truck, my hands were cold. He looked me over and said, "You look really nice." That should have been simple. It landed like a spark. We drove for a while with the radio low and the windows cracked. He talked more than I expected. About work, about being tired, about how messy things had gotten with Aaron before they split. He did not dump the whole story at once. He scattered it through the drive like a man laying out his version carefully enough to seem honest. According to him, she had changed. Then it became that she was controlling. Then that she picked fights. Then that she made everything harder than it had to be. He used that tired, wounded tone that makes a man sound like he is confessing instead of building a case for himself. He did not call her a bad mother, but he painted himself as the one who had tried, the one who had endured, the one who had finally been pushed too far. I listened, half sympathetic and half flattered. Sympathetic because I had never heard the inside of his life before. Flattered because he was letting me hear it now, as if I mattered enough to be brought into that truth. At 19, I did not understand how often men tell stories about other women in ways designed to prepare the ground under your feet. I only knew that he was opening up to me. And after years of wanting his attention, I mistook access for intimacy. At a red light, he glanced over and said, "Can I tell you something without sounding weird?" I laughed and said probably. He kept his eyes on the road and said, "I always noticed you." For a second, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. Then he kept going. He remembered when my family moved in. He remembered how serious I always looked. He said I had this quiet thing about me. He said I had grown up beautiful. When you have privately loved someone for years, hearing that they had seen you too does not feel like ordinary flirtation. It feels like fate finally catching up. Every old feeling I had hidden from the world felt validated all at once. We ended up at a park outside town, where couples sat on benches near the water, and teenagers wandered around with drinks in their hands. The sun was lower by then, the air warm but softening. We walked a little, sat a little, talked. He told me I was prettier than he remembered, said I seemed calmer than most girls he knew. Then he kissed me. For 1 second, it was everything I had imagined. The closeness, the rush, the shock of the thing finally becoming real. But almost immediately, something felt off. He was already moving with more urgency than tenderness. Not violently, just with a speed that made me feel like he was several steps ahead of me. It felt less like a moment unfolding, and more like a door he expected would keep opening. I noticed it. I ignored it. Sometimes the first instinct that something is off arrives right on time, and we talk over it anyway because wanting has momentum. After that, he kept touching me, my waist, my thigh, the side of my chest, not casually and not slowly, with increasing confidence, like my body had already agreed to something my mouth had not. I shifted away a little, laughed once to loosen the tension. He kept going. Then he suggested we go somewhere more private. He did not say motel right away, but he did not need to. I knew exactly what he meant, and the second I knew, something inside me pulled back hard. There is an important truth here. I had kissed a couple of boys before him, nothing serious, but I had never slept with anyone. I just knew I needed trust for that. Patience. Warmth. A sense that I was with someone who cared what the moment meant to me, not just where it could go for him. He did not know any of that, but he also was not acting like a man who cared enough to notice I was pulling back. I said maybe we should head home. He smiled like I was just being shy. Then he kissed me again, harder, and his hand tightened on my leg. He said we could go somewhere nearby. I said more clearly that I wanted to go home. That was when his face changed. Not into some dramatic monster expression. It was subtler than that, which is part of why it hit so hard. The warmth drained out of him. The softness disappeared. His eyes went flat in a way that made me instantly sober. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. He leaned back and said, "All right," in a tone that did not sound all right at all. Even then, part of me was still trying to keep the dream alive. I told myself he was embarrassed. I told myself maybe I had made the moment awkward. It did not matter. The walk back to the parking lot was silent in a way that felt punitive. He opened the passenger door without looking at me. Once we were inside, he shut his own harder than necessary, and that sound landed in my chest like a warning. The drive back was worse. I tried once to smooth it over and asked whether he was upset. He did not answer. He just kept driving with one hand at the top of the steering wheel, jaw tight, radio low, entire body broadcasting annoyance. I sat there feeling myself shrink. That was the moment everything split in two. On one side was the man I had loved from 16 to 19, the one I had built out of distance and longing and imagination. On the other side was the real man sitting beside me in a darkening truck, angry because I had said no to the pace he wanted, and for the first time, the second one was winning. When we pulled up in front of my house, he did not turn the engine off. He just put the truck in park and looked ahead. I said I had a good time. I said I was sorry things got awkward. He gave me nothing. No goodbye kiss, no softening, no effort to repair even the smallest part of what had just happened. Just silence. I opened the door and got out. He drove away before I even reached the porch. I went inside, feeling humiliated in a way I had never felt before, because it was not only rejection, it was collapse. It was years of imagination losing to one real evening. And the worst part is that even then, I did not fully let go. I sat on my bed and did what too many women do when something feels wrong. I looked for a way it might still be my fault. Maybe I had embarrassed him. Maybe I had sent mixed signals. Maybe I should have explained that I was inexperienced, that I needed him to slow down, that it was not him exactly, just the speed and pressure. So I texted him. I apologized if things had gotten weird. I told him I had enjoyed being with him. I reached out first because some part of me was still trying to rescue the fantasy from the evidence. He never replied. Not that night. Not the next day. Not later that week. And when we crossed paths again in the neighborhood, he acted as if almost nothing had happened. That was the first big problem. Not only that he had pushed too fast, not only that he had gone cold the second I set a boundary, but that afterward he left me alone with all the discomfort while he stepped neatly outside of it. No apology, no explanation, no awkward honesty, just absence. That silence did more damage than any insult could have, because it told me something plain. If he had cared about me even a little, there were easy things he could have done. He could have checked on me. He could have admitted he got carried away. He could have said he was sorry. Instead, he chose nothing. And once I was honest enough to feel what that nothing really meant, I realized the first real conflict in my story was no longer whether Matt wanted me. It was whether I was going to keep protecting the fantasy after the real man had already shown me exactly who he was. I wish I could say that after I saw him kiss that woman by his truck, everything inside me settled into something clean. It did not. That would have been easier. It would have let me turn him into a lesson fast, close the door, and walk away feeling wiser instead of smaller. But that is not what happened. What happened was uglier and slower. I still had to live next door to him. I still had to hear his truck, still had to see his face, still had to carry the humiliation of realizing that the man I had wanted for years was not mysterious at all. He was just selfish in a way I had not wanted to name. And the worst part was that he did not fully leave me alone. If he had vanished after that date, maybe I could have been angry in a straight line. Instead, he stayed right there, close enough to keep disturbing my peace, and casual enough to make me question whether I had imagined the edge in him. That was the real beginning of the escalation. Not some dramatic event, but the fact that he stayed ordinary while I was trying to recover from something that no longer felt ordinary to me. The first time I saw him after the date, I had just gotten home from work with my pharmacy badge still clipped to my shirt. He was standing by Linda's mailbox. He looked at me, gave me a short nod, and said, "Hey." That was it. No sign that he remembered the date the same way I did. No hesitation, no apology, no trace of the cold silence in his truck. Just a normal greeting, like nothing important had happened between us at all. I said hey back because I did not know what else to do, then went inside and stood in my room feeling sick in a way I could not explain properly. His coldness in the truck had hurt. His indifference afterward felt worse. At least anger would have admitted that the night meant something. Indifference made it feel like the whole thing had only existed on my side. That should have been enough to end any confusion. Instead, it created a new one. Because the second he acted normal, a weak part of me wondered whether I had overread everything. Maybe he had just been embarrassed. Maybe he did not know how to handle awkwardness. Maybe he was pretending nothing happened because he thought that would make it easier for both of us. That is what hope does when it is dying. It does not go out gracefully. It bargains. For several days, I replayed the date in my head from beginning to end. I kept searching for the exact point where it turned, as if finding the moment precisely might somehow reduce what it meant. The compliments, the drive, the way he talked about Aaron, the kiss, the pressure in his hand on my leg, the change in his face when I said I wanted to go home, the silent drive back. Every time I replayed it, the same conclusion waited for me, and every time I still tried to dodge it. He had been warm while he thought he was getting what he wanted. He went cold when he realized he wasn't. The truth was simple. I just hated how simple it was. Then I overheard Linda and my mother talking near the fence. I was taking trash out. They were speaking in those low, casual neighborhood voices women use when they are discussing someone else's life without wanting to sound like they are. I was not trying to listen, but Matt's name reached me immediately. Linda said he had really been through it lately. My mother made that sympathetic sound she always made when she was already halfway committed to someone's side. Then Linda started talking about Aaron, how difficult she had been, how controlling, how emotional, how much stress Matt had been under, how hard he was trying to do right by his daughter. I stood there with the trash bag in my hand, listening to the same story I had heard in the truck, only softened by a mother's love. The details may not have been identical, but the structure was exactly the same. Matt as the burdened good man. Matt as the one who tried. Matt as the one women made life harder for. That was the first domino. Until then, I had mostly been treating what happened between us as one bad date and one private humiliation. Hearing Linda repeat the shape of his self-defense made me realize I had stepped into a pattern, not an isolated, awkward moment. He did not just behave badly when denied. He also knew how to prepare the ground around himself so that when he behaved badly, there would already be a softer explanation waiting. That realization made the date look worse, not better. A couple of days later, he did it again. I was checking the mail when he came over from the driveway and asked how work had been. His tone was easy, friendly. He smiled the way relaxed men smile when they want the air between you to seem clean. I answered politely because I did not know how not to. Then he said, "You work too hard." That sentence sounds harmless. It did not feel harmless to me. It felt like another small hook tossed into the water, not enough to mean anything clearly. Not enough for me to react to without sounding strange, but enough to remind me that he could still reach into my nervous system whenever he wanted with almost no effort at all. That was when I started understanding something I wish I had understood years earlier. Some men do not keep control by dramatic acts. They keep control by keeping things emotionally unstable. One day cold, next day easy. One day distant, next day lightly warm. Just enough mixed signal to keep you questioning your own judgment. He never apologized. He never brought up the date, but he also never fully disappeared. He would ask a casual question if we crossed paths. Sometimes it was about work. Sometimes something even smaller. Once he asked if I still worked weekends. Another time he asked if I ever went out much with friends. The questions themselves were not aggressive. That was part of what made them so effective. They lived right in the gray area where if I reacted strongly, I would look foolish. But inside me, they kept opening the same wound. Was he circling back? Was he trying to test whether I was still receptive? Was he just enjoying the fact that he could still get a reaction? I did not know. The not knowing was exhausting. Then my mother came inside one evening with more of Linda's updates. Poor Matt was under so much pressure. Poor Matt was dealing with a difficult custody schedule. Poor Matt was trying his best. By then, I could practically hear his voice beneath every sentence. Same wounded tone, same careful positioning, same soft self-defense. Listening to that made something shift harder in me, because it forced me to see our date in a new light. The way he talked about Erin on the drive had not been random openness. It had been set up. Every compliment he gave me had quietly placed me in contrast with her. You're calmer. You're different. You're genuine. At the time, those lines had felt intoxicating. Now I could see what they were doing. He was not just flattering me. He was making me feel morally safer than the woman he had just painted as drama. He was preparing me to receive him as the misunderstood one, and myself as the special exception. That was the second domino. I had not been invited into intimacy. I had been recruited into his narrative. For a while after that, I kept everything to myself. Part of me wanted to tell my best friend, so she could call him exactly what he deserved to be called, and drag me out of my own head. Part of me wanted to tell my mother so somebody in the house would know why the sound of his truck suddenly made me tense up. But humiliation is a silencing force. The story embarrassed me too much, because what had actually happened from the outside? A date, a kiss, some pressure, a sour mood, silence afterward. That is exactly the kind of story people can reduce if they want to. And I could not bear the idea of hearing my own hurt weighed, measured, and possibly found too slight for the impact it had on me. So I carried it alone. And because I carried it alone, it spread. A guy at work asked me to grab burgers after a shift one Friday. He was harmless, funny in a dry way, kind enough. Before Matt, I might have said yes just to see. Instead, I panicked. Not visibly, I do not think, but inside my body it felt like a door slammed shut. I told him I was tired and drove home angry with myself. That was the third domino. Matt was no longer only affecting how I felt about him. He was affecting how I approached every man after him. And I hated that more than I hated the date itself. I hated that one evening in a truck had been enough to make ordinary attention feel dangerous. I hated that even harmless invitations now made me scan for the shift, the turn. The moment warmth would become pressure, and pressure would become offense. Most of all, I hated giving him that much power over my instincts. So I started trying to take control back. I stopped checking the front window when I heard his truck. I stopped timing errands around whether he was outside. I stopped lingering on the porch because some old hopeful part of me wanted to be seen. These were tiny acts, almost pathetic in how small they looked from the outside. But for me, they mattered. I was cutting off the supply line between his presence and my imagination. Then he complicated things again. One evening I came home and found him sitting on Linda's porch steps with his daughter. She was small, all soft blonde curls and pink shoes, holding a toy in her lap. He was laughing at something she had done. The sight of him with her hit me in a way I did not expect. Not because it made him look wonderful, because it made him look human enough to confuse me again. That is part of why women stay tangled in men longer than they should. Not because we are blind, but because people are rarely monstrous in one continuous line. A man can be tender with a child and still selfish with a woman. He can look gentle in daylight and go cold in private. Those truths can live side by side, and if you are still emotionally hooked, the softer one keeps interfering with the harder one. He looked up and saw me, smiled, motioned toward his daughter. This is Ava. I walked a little closer because refusing would have felt strange. She held up her toy. I told her it was cute. He watched the exchange with that proud father softness all over his face. Then he looked at me and said, "She likes pretty girls." It was such a small sentence. Light, almost teasing. And I hated how quickly my stomach still reacted to it. I smiled politely, said she was adorable, and went inside. Once I got to my room, I sat on the edge of my bed furious at myself, because that was all it took. One stray compliment, one soft domestic image, and the old confusion tried to come back. Was he flirting? Was he just being nice? Was he trying to keep me slightly unstable on purpose? I did not know. That uncertainty was part of the punishment. After that, I started really watching him. Not the way I used to as a teenager, with yearning and fantasy. The opposite. I watched for the mechanics. I watched how he talked to women. I watched when his tone changed. I watched how easily he moved between harmless charm and emotional distance. Once you stop admiring someone, details get louder. That is how I noticed the woman by his truck. I came home early one afternoon because my shift had been cut short. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw him leaning against the driver's side door, talking to a woman I had never seen before. She was laughing. He was standing close in that relaxed, angled posture men use when they want their attention to feel personal and deliberate. It was not proof of anything by itself, but the energy was familiar enough that something cold moved through me. I stayed in the car 1 second too long enough to see him smile the same slow smile he had used on me that Saturday by the mower. Then I got out. He noticed me immediately. That was the revealing part. He noticed, adjusted, and stepped back from her just enough to make everything look more casual. "Hey, Alice." The woman looked at me, then at him, then back at me in that quick, measuring way women sometimes do when they sense a story they have not been told. I said, "Hey," and kept walking. Inside my house, my hands shook, but not from heartbreak, from recognition. That was the fourth domino. I had not been special in the way I once wanted to believe. I had not been some unique, long-awaited connection finally surfacing after years. I had simply been available inside his orbit. Softened by history, he may have sensed more than I understood, and he had moved toward me the way men like him move toward women when an opening appears. Seeing another woman by his truck did not prove he was sleeping with everyone in town. It proved something worse for my ego. His attention had not meant what I thought it meant. And once I saw that, the entire date rearranged itself again. The compliments, the quick confessions about Aaron, the way he set me up as the calm, pretty, different alternative, the speed with which he moved physically, the ice the moment I slowed him down. It all stopped looking like chemistry and started looking like method. Maybe not a conscious plan, not in some villainous mastermind sense, but definitely a pattern. A script made of charm, victimhood, flattery, access, then entitlement. That was when my thoughts finally turned more seriously toward Aaron. Until then, she had mostly existed in my mind as the girlfriend I once envied and the ex he complained about. But the more I understood him, the more I started imagining what he must have been like from her side instead of mine. How many times had he used that same tired, injured tone with her? How often had he made himself sound burdened and reasonable while she ended up carrying the emotional weight? How many private moments had he later reduced to things just getting awkward, or not being on the same page, or her overreacting? I did not know. But once those questions entered my mind, they changed the moral center of the story for me. This was no longer mainly about me being hurt that a crush had collapsed. It was about recognizing a type of man and realizing I had almost volunteered myself for a longer version of the same treatment. That shift mattered. It did not erase the embarrassment. It gave it structure. I still thought about confronting him. More than once I imagined stopping him in the yard and saying exactly what I thought, telling him I knew what he was doing when he floated back into friendliness without accountability, telling him that the whole injured good man act had worn thin, telling him I saw how he liked to leave women holding the emotional confusion while he kept the cleaner version of himself. But every version of that confrontation ended the same way in my head. He would minimize, shrug, act puzzled, tell me I was reading too much into one date, maybe even laugh softly in that dismissive way men use when they want your certainty to sound dramatic. I realized I did not want to hand him another chance to shape reality in front of me. so I fought him quietly instead. I kept my answers short. I stopped smiling for free. I stopped helping him pretend nothing had happened. The next time he asked a casual question when I got out of my car, I answered in one word and kept walking. A few days later, he asked if I had a long day. I said yes and did not stop. These were tiny exchanges, but I could feel the difference in them. He was used to easy access. I was withdrawing it. And maybe because he felt that. Maybe because men like him always notice when they are losing a certain kind of emotional reach. The next thing he did killed the last weak corner of me that still wanted to believe there had once been something singular between us. It was late afternoon. I was upstairs folding laundry when I happened to glance out the window. His truck was parked in front of Linda's house. The same woman from earlier was there again. This time he kissed her. Not a hesitant kiss. Not some ambiguous, almost moment. A real kiss beside the driver's side door, casual and practiced. The kind of easy intimacy that made it obvious this was not new. I watched for maybe 1 second. Then I stepped back from the window. Not because it shattered me, because it clarified everything. That was the 5th domino and the most important one. He was not circling me because of some unfinished emotional depth. He was not staying casually warm because he cared. He was not keeping the line open because something meaningful had happened between us that he did not know how to resolve. He simply moved through women the way some men do. Charm first, sympathy second, access third, then coldness the moment real consideration is required. Once I saw that clearly, the years of mystery collapsed. I was not the girl he had secretly noticed all along in some romantic way. I was one more opening inside a familiar pattern. And strangely, that did not destroy me. It freed me. Because once the illusion was fully dead, he became readable. Small. Ordinary. A decent-looking man with a soft voice, a practiced way of sounding sincere, and an entitlement that showed itself the second he did not get what he wanted. That is not a grand villain. It is something far more common and, in some ways, more disappointing. For a few days after that, I felt almost calm, not healed, not happy, just clear. Then my mother made things worse without meaning to. She came inside after talking to Linda and said poor Matt had another rough exchange with Aaron about pickup times for Ava. She said he was really trying. Said Linda felt terrible for him. I asked what exactly he was trying so hard at. My mother looked surprised by my tone. She said she did not know all the details, only that things were stressful and complicated when kids were involved. Stressful. Complicated. Hard. Always the same soft blanket thrown over a man's behavior. I wanted to tell her everything right then. I wanted to say he was not some exhausted saint caught between difficult women. I wanted to say I had seen enough to know exactly how skilled he was at sounding reasonable after leaving a mess behind. But I still could not make myself say it. That was the 6th domino, maybe the cruelest one. By then I knew the truth about him, but I was still helping protect him with my silence. And that silence started feeling like betrayal, not of some bigger cause, but of myself. Once that feeling set in, everything changed. Every time I heard my mother say his name with sympathy, I got angrier. Every time I saw Linda beam when he came by, I felt something harder and colder take shape inside me. Every time he nodded casually at me like we shared some harmless little history, I wanted to ask whether he ever got tired of being protected by women who only knew the edited version. I did not say any of that, but the pressure kept building. That is what made the next stage inevitable. Because by then, the problem was no longer just that Matt had disappointed me. The problem was that consequences were spreading in every direction except toward him, and I could not keep being the only one who knew what the cleaner version of him was hiding. After I told my mother the truth, I knew the story had changed shape. Until then, everything humiliating about Matt had lived inside me. The date, the pressure, the silence afterward. The way he turned cold the second I said no. All of it had been private, which was part of why it had stayed so poisonous. Private hurt makes you question your own scale. You start wondering whether it was really that bad, whether you are being too sensitive, whether the fact that you cannot stop thinking about it means more about your weakness than about what the other person did. The second I said it out loud, that changed. Not because the pain disappeared, because now there was risk. My mother knew, which meant the version of him I had been carrying alone was no longer fully mine to contain. That should have felt like relief. Instead, at first, it felt like exposure. My mother stood in the kitchen for a few seconds after I finished telling her what happened. She looked unsettled in that practical, adult way people do when they realize a situation is messier than they wanted it to be. She asked one or two questions, careful ones. Had he forced me? Had he threatened me? Had he contacted me after? No. 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 And I could feel, even while answering, how easily a woman's pain gets reduced by what technically did not happen. He did not force me. He did not trap me. He did not text me anything cruel. What he did was smaller than that, which is exactly why it gets protected so often. He pushed. He soured. He punished the mood. He withdrew basic warmth the moment I would not go where he wanted. Then he left me carrying all of it alone. There is no bruising from that. No broken lock. No clean headline. Just a woman sitting in her room afterward feeling ashamed of how much a single night revealed. My mother said what he did was immature. That word irritated me immediately. Immature. It sounded too soft, too youthful, too accidental. Like he was some awkward boy who got embarrassed and handled it badly. Matt was not a boy. He was a grown man with a child, a failed relationship, and enough experience with women to know exactly what sulking silence does after pressure fails. I told her that. Not in those exact words, but enough. I said, it wasn't awkward. He changed the second I said no. That landed harder. My mother nodded, but I could still see the familiar cultural instinct in her face, the one that wants to round male behavior down into something easier to absorb. Stress, bad timing, misread signals, different pace. Everybody wants the version that makes a man flawed without making him ugly. Then she asked if Linda knew. I said no. My mother pressed her lips together, and I knew from that expression alone that this was no longer contained. Even if she said nothing directly, even if she tried to be discreet, the current between her and Linda would shift. Women who have spent years talking over fences notice tension like weather. That was the beginning of the real crisis. Because the story was no longer only about what Matt had done. It was about what would happen once his cleaner version of events collided with mine in public air. The next day felt wrong immediately. Linda did not wave when I came home from work. My mother was quieter than usual. Even the house felt tense, as if the walls had heard something before I had. I moved through the evening, waiting for some signal, some confirmation that the thing I had hidden for weeks was now moving beyond me. It came the following afternoon. I had just stepped outside to bring in a package when Linda called my name from her yard. Her voice was tight, not furious, not yet, but stripped of warmth. The second I turned and saw her face, I knew. She asked if I had a minute. In moments like that, the body knows before the mind finishes catching up. My shoulders tightened. My stomach went cold. Part of me wanted to say I had to leave. Part of me wanted to pretend I did not understand what this was about. But another part, the part that had gotten so tired of swallowing the truth in private, knew that backing away now would feel worse than staying. So I said yes. I walked closer, but not all the way to the fence. I wanted distance. Not safety exactly. Just enough room to remind myself I was not a child being summoned. Linda did not waste time. She asked whether I had told my mother that Matt took me out and treated me badly. The phrasing itself told me a lot. Not what happened. Not what he did. Treated me badly. Vague enough to sound manageable. Vague enough to leave room for his version to remain respectable. I said yes. She inhaled slowly, then said Matt had already told her they went out once and things got awkward. That phrase lit something cruel and clear inside me. Got awkward. There it was. The coffin men build when they want to bury your experience without calling you a liar. Nothing happened. Nobody got hurt. Things just got awkward. I said, "That's not what happened." Linda asked what did happen, and for 1 second I saw exactly how exposed I was. I was standing in my own yard about to describe her son back to her in a language she did not want. A son is not just a man to a mother. He is years of memory, years of excuses, years of wanting the world to read him kindly. I knew before I opened my mouth that truth would sound rude in comparison to love. I told her anyway, that he asked me out, that he moved too fast, that I said I wanted to go home, that he got cold immediately, that he drove me back in silence like I had done something to him, that afterward he never apologized and acted like nothing had happened. I said it plainly. No theatrics, no embellishment, just facts. Linda listened, but I could see resistance moving through her face almost as fast as understanding. She did not think I was inventing it. That would have been easier to fight. What she was doing was worse. She was trying to absorb it in the gentlest possible way. She said he probably felt embarrassed. I said, I felt embarrassed. He felt denied. That landed. I saw it land because her expression hardened for the first time. She said he had been under a lot of pressure, that his breakup with Aaron had been ugly, that sometimes men do not handle rejection well when they are already stressed. Stressed. There it was again. The universal detergent for male behavior. Stress. Pressure. A hard time. Enough hardship in the backstory and suddenly a man can drag his ugliness through a room and people start stepping around it instead of naming it. I said, then he shouldn't have asked me out if all he wanted was somebody easy. That changed the air immediately. Maybe it was the word easy. Maybe it was the fact that I had finally said the hidden truth underneath all of it. He did not want tenderness. He did not want closeness. He wanted cooperation. Linda said Matt would never intentionally hurt anyone. That sentence stripped the rest of my patience away. Because what is intentionally supposed to do there? Clean his hands? Make the effect softer because maybe he did not wake up planning it? I looked at her and said, he did. Just that. He did. No modifiers, no theory, no sympathy for the fact that hearing it was unpleasant. That silence after was bigger than either of us wanted. Then Linda asked the ugliest question she could have asked, without realizing how ugly it was. She asked whether I had told anyone else. Not "Are you okay?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "I didn't know." Just "How far is this gone?" That was the moment I stopped caring about protecting anybody's comfort. I said no. And the flash of relief on her face insulted me more deeply than anger would have. She was relieved not because I was all right, but because the story was still containable. Before either of us could say more, Matt came around the side of the house. He had a bottle of water in one hand. He saw us standing there and stopped immediately. It is strange what the mind notices in moments like that. I remember his shirt sticking slightly at the chest from sweat. I remember the way his eyes moved from Linda to me and back again. I remember, most of all, the split second where I watched him understand that whatever version of himself he preferred had already been interrupted. That was the real mental thumbnail of the whole story. Not the date, not the kiss, not the truck. This. Me standing in my yard, his mother tight-faced beside the fence, and him walking into the scene with nowhere to hide except language. Linda said his name sharply. He asked what was going on. I said, she asked what happened between us. I wanted the sentence to stay simple. I did not want him pretending this was hysteria or some wild accusation. Between us, two people, one truth. His jaw tightened. Then he reached for the exact move I should have expected by then. Calm, reasonable, lightly inconvenienced calm. He said, "I already told her." We went out and it got awkward. I looked straight at him and said, "No." "You got angry because I said no." The second the sentence was out, the whole thing became irreversible. Linda shifted. Matt glanced at her, then at me. And then he smiled, but not warmly. It was that small, disbelieving smile men use when they want your precision to sound excessive without having to challenge it directly. He said, "Alice, come on." That phrase made me hate him more than the truck silence ever had, because come on is not confusion. It is contempt disguised as ease. It means I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm going to make it sound like too much anyway. I said, "Don't do that." His smile disappeared. He said he was not doing anything. Said I was making it sound like he had done something terrible, when really we just were not on the same page. Not on the same page. Another coffin. Another soft phrase. Another neat little box built to bury disrespect without the mess of naming it. I said, "Being on different pages would have been me saying no, and you still treating me like a person." Linda sucked in a breath so quietly I almost missed it. Matt's face changed. That was the first truly honest thing I saw on it since the date. Not guilt, not shame. Irritation. The plain irritation of a man who is suddenly being denied the cleaner interpretation he expected to get for free. He said he never forced me. I said, "That's not the point." He asked what the point was. And that was the moment something in me went cold in exactly the way his had in the truck, except mine was cleaner. Mine was clarity. I said, "The point is that you were warm while you thought you were getting what you wanted. And the second I said no, you turned cold. Then you ignored me after. That tells me exactly what I was to you. There are silences that feel like emptiness. This one felt like exposure." Linda was looking at him now, really looking, not at her son in the shape she had preserved him in, at a man a woman had just described with a level of detail too specific to wave away comfortably. Matt's face went flat. Then he did what men like him always do when accuracy corners them. He reduced the woman. He said I was being dramatic. That word should have hurt. Instead, it freed me. Because the second he said it, every last piece of doubt I had left about him died. There it was. The simplest move in the world. If the facts sound ugly, shrink the woman saying them. Make her tone the issue. Make her scale the problem. Make her hurt the overreaction. I said, "No, I'm being accurate." He laughed once under his breath. Not loudly, not angrily. Worse. With that small thread of contempt that says I should not have to sit through this. That laugh showed me more than an apology ever could have. It told me he still believed the real offense here was not what he had done. It was that I had said it aloud where somebody else could hear. Linda said his name again, sharper. He did not answer her. He kept looking at me, and for one ugly second I could see the exact same man from the truck, the one who went cold the moment he stopped getting cooperation. The only difference was that now he had an audience and had to wear his irritation under a thinner layer of control. He said, "You're acting like I used you." I said, "You tried to." That hit harder than anything else I said, because it stripped away all the soft phrasing. No awkwardness, no miscommunication, no different pace. Intent without success is still intent. For the first time, he looked genuinely rattled. Not destroyed, not remorseful. Just rattled that I had refused every smaller word he offered and kept choosing the truer one. Linda asked him quietly if that was true. He did not answer her directly. He said I was twisting things. Said I knew he was dealing with a lot. Said he thought I understood that he was in a messy place. There it was again. Stress. Messy place. The emotional smoke bomb he dropped every time the facts got too sharp. I said, "A messy place doesn't make you punish someone for saying no." He looked at me like he wanted me to stop, not because I was wrong, but because I was no longer cooperating with the version of him he was used to women helping preserve. And that was the cruelest part of the whole confrontation. Not that he denied it. That he denied it so casually. As if my humiliation was a slight inconvenience in the middle of his day. As if my clarity was somehow ruder than his behavior. As if the thing that needed smoothing over was my tone, not his conduct. That was when I stopped trying to get him to understand. Understanding requires conscience. What he had in that moment was self-protection. So I turned to Linda and said, "I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm just not carrying his cleaner version of this anymore." That sentence ended it. Not because it resolved anything, because it named the actual burden. For weeks I had been carrying the ugly version alone while he moved around freely inside the edited one. I was done doing that. Whether his mother absorbed the truth, rejected it, softened it, or buried it under love, was her business. Whether he walked away believing I was dramatic or difficult or unfair was his business. I was finished holding the dirt while he held the language. I turned and walked back toward my house. Nobody stopped me. I could feel my hands shaking before I even got through the front door. By the time I reached my room, the adrenaline had hit so hard I had to sit down. I cried then, but not because I regretted a single word. I cried because confrontation after silence feels like skin being removed. You do not just tell the truth. You feel every place you once bent to avoid telling it. Outside, sometime later, I heard muffled voices. One was Linda's. One was his. I could not make out the words. I never asked. I did not need to. Whatever excuse he gave after I walked away was no longer mine to hear. The crisis had already peaked. The confrontation had already done its real work. He had been seen, maybe not fully. Maybe not in the clean, punishing way hurt people fantasize about. But enough. Enough that his smooth version of events no longer stood alone. Enough that his mother had heard another language for him. Enough that I was no longer the only witness to the man behind the softer words. And that was the cruel truth at the center of everything. The hardest part was never learning who Matt was. The hardest part was saying I knew. The next morning, nothing looked different. That was the first truth. The street was still the same. Linda's porch was still there. My mother still made coffee too strong and left the mug by the sink while she moved around the kitchen. The same pickup trucks still passed by. The same dogs barked 2 houses down. Even Matt's truck was where it usually was, half a little too far into the curb like he had parked it in a hurry and never bothered correcting it. That almost made everything worse. Because after a confrontation like that, some part of you expects visible wreckage. You expect a sign that the truth changed the world in a way other people can see. But most of the time it doesn't. Most truths do their damage internally, quietly. They rearrange people from the inside, while the outside stays rude enough to remain ordinary. I still had to get dressed for work. I still had to walk out my front door. And I still had to face the fact that I had finally said it out loud. And the man I had once built entire private fantasies around had answered with the smallest possible version of himself. That was the second truth. He never came over. He never knocked. He never texted. Not that day. Not later that week. Not ever. No apology. No explanation. No late attempt to make himself sound better. Nothing. At first that silence stung in the old way. Then it changed shape. Because the longer it lasted, the more clearly I understood what it meant. He had nothing better to offer than what I had already seen. That was the whole truth in the end. Not some hidden tragedy. Not some misunderstood tenderness buried under stress and bad timing. Not some deep man who had simply handled one night poorly. The truth was smaller and uglier than that. He was exactly as decent as he remained when he did not get what he wanted. And once I knew that, the rest of the story collapsed fast. A few days after the confrontation, my mother told me Linda had been quiet. Not angry exactly, just embarrassed. She said she thought Linda was upset by the whole situation. I asked whether Matt had said anything. My mother said only that he claimed it had all been blown out of proportion. That phrase should have hurt me. Instead, it almost made me laugh. Of course that was what he said, because men like him are never standing in the middle of what they did. They are always standing one step to the side of it, looking back at your reaction like that was the most disproportionate thing in the room. He could pressure, sulk, freeze over, erase, and dismiss. But the moment a woman names it clearly, suddenly, she is the one enlarging events beyond reason. Hearing that should have reignited everything. Instead, it finished something. I did not need him to understand me anymore. That was the climax, even though from the outside it looked almost invisible. Not the yard, not the argument, not the exposure. The real climax happened inside me when I heard his final version and realized I no longer cared whether he ever corrected it. For years, the emotional center of the story had been him seeing me. Then it became him choosing me. Then it became him revealing himself. And at the very end, it became me no longer needing anything from him at all. That was the only ending that mattered. After that, detachment came faster than I expected. Not perfectly, not all at once. But once the confrontation had stripped away the last decorative layer, he became almost painfully easy to read. Every casual hello looked thin. Every easygoing movement looked practiced. Every time I heard his truck, it no longer carried mystery with it. Just information. This is where he lives. This is the man he is. That's all. I saw him a few more times after that in the normal ways neighbors see each other. One brief nod while I was getting into my car. One polite hello near the curb. Once, from a distance, I saw him carrying his daughter toward Linda's porch. And even that no longer had the power to confuse me the way it used to. He could be gentle with a child. He could laugh in daylight. He could look ordinary. None of that erased anything. That was another hard truth I had to learn. A man does not become safe just because other parts of him are pleasant to look at. People are not false because they have good moments. They are dangerous because the good moments make you argue with the bad ones longer than you should. I stopped doing that. The fantasy was gone. And when fantasy dies, a strange thing happens. The person often shrinks. He did. Not physically, not even socially. Just in my mind, where he had once occupied far too much space. Without longing inflating him, he became what he should have been all along. One man, flawed in a very ordinary way, no longer carrying the emotional weight of destiny. That gave me something back I had not realized I lost. Scale. For too long, the story had been shaped like this giant private wound. Partly because it had started when I was 16, and still impressionable enough to confuse intensity with significance. But once the truth settled, I could see proportions again. He had not ruined my life. He had not stolen my future. He had exposed a weakness in how I loved. And painful as that was, exposure is not the same thing as destruction. I had survived with more of myself intact than I first believed. That realization changed the shame too. For a while, I had looked back at that younger version of me with irritation. How could I have built so much around someone I barely knew? How could I have given years of emotional weight to a man whose real self folded so fast under the smallest frustration? Later, the feeling softened. Because the truth is, I was not stupid. I was young. I was hopeful. I was the kind of girl who felt things deeply and privately. And those girls are often most vulnerable to men who know how to seem quietly sincere. The flaw was not that I had a tender imagination. The flaw was that I had trusted it more than evidence for too long. That difference matters. It let me forgive myself without lying to myself. I had wanted him because wanting him said something flattering about me. That was the deeper truth underneath everything, the one I could only admit once the rest of the story was over. An older man I had admired from a distance had finally noticed me, finally chosen me, finally said I was beautiful. At 19, that kind of attention does not just feel romantic, it feels confirming. It feels like proof that you have become someone. So when the reality cracked, it did not only break the crush, it hit my ego, my confidence, my sense of womanhood. That was why it hurt so disproportionately. I was not just losing a man I never truly had. I was losing what his attention had seemed to say about my worth. But here is the thing I know now that I did not know then. Attention is cheap. Access is cheap. Desire is cheap. None of them mean what young women are trained to think they mean when they come from the wrong man. What matters is character at the point of refusal. What matters is warmth after a boundary. What matters is whether someone still treats you like a full human being after you disappoint their agenda. That was the final lesson he gave me, and it was the only useful thing he ever really left behind. Not long after all of this, a guy from work asked me out again. Not Josh this time, someone else. Nice enough. Ordinary. The kind of man I might have dismissed too easily before because he did not arrive surrounded by years of fantasy and emotional voltage. My first instinct was still caution, but this time the caution felt cleaner, less like fear, more like discernment. I said yes to coffee, and the whole way there I kept waiting for that old alarm in my body, the one that said danger and confusion were just the price of wanting. It never came. He was easy to be around. He listened when I spoke. He did not perform wounded depth. He did not use another woman as a contrast to flatter me. He did not crowd me. He did not turn moody when I stayed reserved. When the evening ended, he walked me to my car, smiled, and said he had a good time. Then he went home. That simple. I sat in my car afterward and almost cried, not because I liked him so much, but because the contrast was so brutal. Kindness had none of the fever that fantasy had once made me mistake for chemistry. It was quieter, safer, less cinematic. And because of Matt, I was finally able to understand that quiet was not lack. Quiet was health. That may sound small, but to me it was everything. It meant he had not contaminated me permanently. It meant I could still feel, still trust, still want, just with different eyes. And that is the third and final truth. The man I loved from 16 to 19 never really existed. Matt did. Matt, the real one, was a man who could sound sincere, look soft in the right light, make a girl feel chosen, then reveal his actual size the moment she slowed him down. He was not a great villain. He was something more common and, in some ways, more disappointing than that. He was ordinary male entitlement wrapped in a face I had once made sacred. That was the truth. The climax was realizing it. The ending was what it changed in me. Because when I look back now, the story is no longer about the neighbor's son. It is not even really about the date. It is about the moment a private fantasy met reality, and reality won so hard that I had to rebuild my instincts from the ground up. And if I strip everything else away, this is what remains. At 16, I thought love meant intensity. At 19, I thought being chosen meant being valued. By the end of it, I knew better. The man I had been waiting for all those years was never Matt. It was the version of myself who could finally look at him clearly and walk away without asking to be loved first. What would you do in this situation? Be honest. Or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.